This is Command Post, a series of discussions about military matters from Time and the Center for a New American Security.
General Barno, the President has made clear to his national security team that over the coming 12 years, he wants another $400 billion taken out of the nation's security spending. How much of this can be done without harming the national security? How tough of a mission is this going to be?
Well, it certainly isn't going to be easy. That's a sizable amount of money, even in the gigantic Defense Department budget. That's real money. What's a bit disturbing about the way that was conveyed to the Defense Department is that it didn't come with any new strategy attached to it. And so the Defense Department, in a sense, is being asked to make cutbacks, trade-offs, changes in capabilities without really knowing what the President and what the United States is going to aim for as far as its global security policy in the same 13-year period. So it's a bit of putting the cart before the horse. I know the Defense Department this summer is working very hard to craft what type of adjustments in strategy might need to be implemented in order to put in place the $400 billion cuts, but that's not there yet. So in my judgment, the United States is going to continue to have the overarching role around the world that it's had over the last 10, 15, 20 years and beyond. I think we have to find ways to do that with spending less on defense, and I think that's eminently doable. But I also think that there's got to be some degree of appetite suppressant out there with presidents and administrations who want to get involved in every conflict that comes along.
What's interesting, or what was interesting to me about the notion was, number one, we usually do this in 5 or 10 year chunks. This was done in 12. We usually talk about the national security budget account or Pentagon spending. They didn't do that. They called it security spending. There are all these elastic bands put on it that made it sort of squishy. And as you point out, there wasn't really a change in the national security strategy. Do you folks get an idea that what they're going to do is simply ask the military, hey guys, come back with different missions that we can accommodate within this rubber band? I mean, and is that the Pentagon's job?
That's some of what's happening now. Is the services have been asked, the various agencies inside the Pentagon have been asked, go back and for this much of a cut, tell me what capability you would recommend giving up. And so the strategy behind these decisions is coming from the bottom up, from inside the organization, rather than from a top-down look at American foreign policy, at our interests, the threats to those interests, our values, and what missions we want the national security agencies to be able to accomplish for us. So some of those decisions, I think and hope, are going to be packaged in such a way that the Secretary of Defense, the President, the National Security Council are going to look at various capability packages and say, we still need this, we still need this, I'm willing to accept risk here. But the fact is, over the past 10 years of dramatically increased defense spending, we haven't purchased an awful lot of capability which has been aging. We have not purchased a new bomber in the last decade. We have not filled the gap in our shipbuilding. And the number of ships is actually continuing to decline rather than increasing, even as we've got China becoming a much more serious naval presence in the Western Pacific. The Air Force has major reinvestments to make after the defense procurement holiday of the 1990s during the Clinton defense drawdown at the end of the Cold War. And we didn't, during this past decade, make good on those shortcomings either. Almost all of the expenditures went into the ground forces. So there are some real capability gaps already in the current defense program, and we're being asked to make big cuts in that without saying what capabilities it is we're willing to give up, what risks we're willing to take.
But you guys are experts, and maybe you can just answer me this pretty simple question. Why are we spending more now, eliminating our wars on average, than we did during the Cold War? I can remember sitting around with Barry Goldwater and John Tower saying, my God, if that Soviet Union weren't here, our defense budget would be half as much. Yet the Soviet Union is now gone and our defense budget is higher than it was during the Cold War. Is there a simple answer for that? Is the world just more complicated? Personnel costs going through the roof? What is it?
I'm not sure that those numbers are exactly right in terms of the Cold War, but clearly the Defense Department budget is very large. But you can't figure out whether we're spending the right amount of money or not until there's a strategy of knowing what we want to accomplish in the world. You have to have that conversation before you can decide whether you're spending the right amount, too much or too little. The fact is the U.S. is a global power. It has global interests that it wants to protect. And that will require the United States to be engaged in the world, to be able to project power and to be able to protect those interests wherever they occur in the world. However, how many of those you do at one time, how many missions you're prepared for, what types of missions, those are all fundamental questions of strategy that really haven't been answered quite clearly yet. That's what is going to be, I think, an important part of these discussions in the next couple of years. What types of scenarios does the Defense Department and the administration more broadly want to prepare for? Do you want to be prepared for what had been the case, 2 simultaneous major regional wars? If you want to be able to do that, the costs are going to be pretty high because of all the capabilities that John mentions before that you need to be able to have. If you're willing to accept some amount of risk there, say you only prepare for one, or you're only prepared for a smaller number of peacekeeping and perhaps counterterrorism missions, then you may be accepting a lot of risk if something big blows up, but you'll be able to have much more sustained, lower defense budgets. So the real question should be about the strategy and what's in the nation's interest to pursue, and then you can have an assessment of whether we've got the numbers right or wrong. But in the abstract of a strategic concept, it's really hard to know whether spending is at the right level or the wrong level.
And I think too, you know, looking back over the Cold War, at times during the Cold War, we were spending in excess of 10% of our gross domestic product on the military. Today, that number, if you strip out Afghanistan and Iraq, is 3.5%. So in relative terms to the size of our economy, the size of our country, the size of our population, the percent that's being devoted to defense is probably a whole lot smaller than most Americans actually think it is. But with that, we're going to have to look at how we wring every last bit of effectiveness out of those dollars. Those are precious commodities in the world we live in today. The Defense Department's got a terribly bad track record of being able to do reductions and preserve its capabilities while reducing its top line. If it was a corporate entity, the way defense has traditionally taken its cuts is it's kept up all the corporate headquarters and closed the factories and sent home the workers and shut down production lines. Any business goes bankrupt when it does that. The Defense Department has operated that way through several series of cutbacks after Vietnam, after the Cold War. Now the challenge is to maximize those factories and those production lines, reduce your corporate headquarters, use those business efficiencies that every other part of the United States has put in place in the private sector over the last 15 years, and wring as much defense as you can out of those precious dollars.